The book of Genesis introduces us to Abram and Sarai, a couple chosen by God to become the parents of a great nation. God promised Abram that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. However, many years passed, and Sarai remained childless. This was a source of great sorrow for her, as it was customary in those times for women to have children, especially if they were to inherit their husband's property and status. Sarai, in her desperation, decided to take matters into her own hands. She offered her Egyptian maidservant Hagar to Abram as a wife. This was not an uncommon practice at the time. Sarai hoped that Hagar would bear a child for Abram, and that this child would then be considered her own. Abram agreed to Sarai's plan, and Hagar soon became pregnant. However, this arrangement created tension in the household. Hagar, now carrying Abram's child, began to look down on Sarai, who was unable to conceive. Sarai in turn felt deeply hurt and humiliated by Hagar's attitude. This difficult situation reveals the human tendency to take matters into our own hands when faced with what seems like an impossible situation. Sarai and Abram, though people of faith, allowed their impatience and fear to cloud their judgment. They acted out of desperation, failing to trust in God's timing and plan. The relationship between Sarai and Hagar deteriorated rapidly. Sarai treated Hagar harshly, and Hagar, feeling trapped and mistreated, fled into the wilderness. She found herself alone and afraid, far from home and the only security she had ever known. It was in this moment of despair that God intervened. An angel of the Lord appeared to Hagar beside a spring of water. He asked her where she had come from and where she was going. Hagar, overwhelmed with emotion, poured out her heart to the angel, telling him of her plight. The angel listened compassionately to Hagar's story. He then instructed her to return to Sarai and submit to her authority, promising that God had heard her affliction. The angel also gave Hagar a glimpse into the future of the child she carried. "You are pregnant and will give birth to a son," he said. "You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery." Hagar, comforted by the angel's words, returned to Abram and Sarai. In time she gave birth to a son whom she named Ishmael, just as the angel had instructed. The name Ishmael means God hears, a constant reminder of God's compassion and intervention in Hagar's life. Despite the birth of Ishmael, the tension in Abram's household remained. Years later, God appeared again to Abram, reaffirming his covenant with him and changing his name to Abraham, and Sarai's name to Sarah. God promised Abraham that Sarah would bear him a son, and through this son, his covenant would be established. This promise, however, did not erase the pain and resentment that had festered between Sarah and Hagar. Eventually, Sarah demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. This was a difficult decision for Abraham, but he obeyed God's command to listen to Sarah. Once again, Hagar found herself alone in the wilderness with her son. Yet, God had not forgotten them. He protected them during their journey and provided for their needs. Ishmael grew up in the wilderness and became a skilled archer. He married an Egyptian woman and they had 12 sons, fulfilling the prophecy that he would be the father of a great nation. The story of Hagar is a powerful reminder that even in the midst of human error and suffering, God's love and faithfulness endure. It highlights the themes of faith, impatience, and divine intervention, themes that resonate throughout the Bible. Though Hagar faced injustice and hardship, she remained a woman of faith, trusting in God's promises even when her circumstances seemed bleak. Through her story, we are reminded that God sees and hears the cries of the afflicted, and his plans will ultimately prevail.